Thank you, everybody, so much for joining in for our webinar. This is our first webinar of the year for our Road to Secure series. Webinar 1 is titled Best Practices from the Experts to Kickstart Your Cybersecurity Journey in 2023. With that, I'll pass it over to Raum.
All right. Yes, so this is our Road to Secure series, as Claire mentioned. So we're going to give you a high-level roadmap on how to secure your business. So I'm Raum Sandoval. I am the CISO here at Entara, the Chief Information Security Officer. And I've been in the managed services space for about 15 years, managing infrastructures, securing infrastructures for hundreds of businesses across the globe. And I have Megan Mayer, our Director of Cybersecurity, here as well. And I'll let her introduce herself.
Thanks, Raum. I'm Megan Mayer. I'm the Director of Cybersecurity Services here at Entara. I've been in the cybersecurity space for the last 15 years, both in the technical and leadership role. Most of my career I've spent in the manufacturing or critical infrastructure, but within the last year I have transitioned into the managed security space. So thanks. I look forward to sharing our journey and being a part of this webinar series. And from there, turn it back over to Raum to talk through who is Entara.
And we're putting security first. So we've created kind of our security standards that we consider non-negotiable, right? So if you want to be a client of Entara's, there's certain things that you have to have in place or a roadmap to get in place. Being a services provider and having access to client environments inherently is a high risk endeavor. So we need to make sure that we're protected just as much as the clients our clients are protected. Just a little bit more about the XSP, the extended services provider. So a lot of people don't necessarily know what that is, but what we basically did was kind of bridge the gap between traditional managed services providers, which is more traditional IT operations that you see on the left. And we combined it kind of with what would be kind of a typical MSSP. MSSP has a very broad meaning at this point. It can mean coverage of a little bit or coverage of a lot. But what we do is we try to have that full security coverage and basically marry the two, right? So that you're not seeing inefficiencies between two different third-party organizations, managed services provider, managed security services provider, and really helping our clients be that single point of contact, and which helps with both strategy, but also operations and importantly, security incident response. You do not want to be being a flight controller and never done it before in the middle of an incident. And what we also do is we have professional services that is focused on deployments and projects, pretty typical. But we also have a big focus area of digital forensics and incident response. So we help companies, not our managed clients, that, if there is the case of a breach or a cyber attack, we will help the clients navigate the incident response, the forensics investigations, and most importantly, the recovery and the hardening of the environment during the recovery period. And so it seems like a lot of things here that we do, but essentially what our service is we provide the strategy and make it easy to understand and is tailored towards your specific organization. So how we do that is kind of the road mapping. So jumping into, sorry, before we do that, let Megan explain a little bit more about cybersecurity.
Thanks, Raum. Appreciate that. So before we kind of jump into how to build your cybersecurity roadmap and get into your kind of journey, we want to just take a step back and help you understand what is cybersecurity. Mostly, cybersecurity comes off as a reactive, but we also want to make sure that it's known that we want to put defensive mechanisms in place. So we're kind of always playing both sides of the fence of, can we balance that usability versus security, put defense mechanisms in place to keep you and your organization safe, but what other proactive or offensive security measures can we be doing, such as, putting in new tooling, so, how can we continue to adapt with the threat landscape? The underlying thing about cybersecurity is that it always needs to align with your business goals of your organization. We want to make sure that whatever those business goals are, it has to be aligned, so that way it's a top-down support and security is adopted from the top of the organization all the way throughout. It's also good to know that cybersecurity landscape is always evolving. The cyber adversaries are always trying to adapt their techniques, their approaches, their threats, their incidents, and we always want to make sure we're on top of it and that we can be agile in the fact that the organization can adapt to those new changes, and be ready and prepared for them. So why is cybersecurity so important? The underlying part of it is that we want you to be safe and protected. Cybersecurity planning helps you really define what you need to do, what those guidelines are, what planning steps you need to take. So the safety aspect, it kind of extends more than just your physical safety. It now extends to that cyber part of it. One example is just always thinking, from an organization, we think of active shooters. How would you respond to that? How would you adapt your office? What, protection measures you have in place in order to properly respond? This is just the same thing, but extending it to cyber, how you protect your, company. What's your employees, we call them crown jewels. What are you trying to protect? Is it intellectual property? Is it, a product that you make? Is it your customers' private data, credit card information? Really understanding what is it that you want to protect. From there, it's kind of that empower phrase. You want your users to kind of focus on their business, that, your customers, that their information is safe while doing business with your company, that your users are safe while they're in that working environment, that they, COVID kind of made everybody change. How can we now work safely from our houses? When, people were traditionally in offices, it was much easier to protect a physical space, but now you have to protect the user and the endpoint while at home. And then on that, it's just kind of always improving. Reputation is very important when it comes to business. You want to make sure that as a trusted partner or employer, your reputation is intact, and that your response to an impact. So, if you do, how would you respond to it? If an account's compromised and, you start sending emails out to external users, how can we, ensure that your reputation maintains in place and your business is protected?
Thank you.
So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Raum, and you can talk through how you can start your cybersecurity journey.
All right. Thank you, Megan. Yeah, so this journey series is not meant to be the end all be all, but we do want to make sure that we are helping address the most common attack vectors that usually begin with the people or the employees within your organization. And also, what this this journey webinar will address is a lot of the most common items that cyber insurance is looking for, various security frameworks. So you're going to be addressing a lot of those things inherently by focusing on what we talk about in this series. But with that said, like, the series doesn't take into account your specific environment, your specific business and the specific risk that you may face. And the best approach is, a holistic and detailed view of your environment, and aligning with a framework and ultimately performing a risk-based assessment. Everything we talk about today is absolutely critical and needs to be adopted by all companies, no matter how big and no matter how small. So with any of this stuff, it's not just a checkbox exercise. It should be part of an ongoing IT and security strategy. So with that being said, the first part I'm going to talk about is the foundations, followed by multi-factor authentication, managed detection response, and then we'll jump into email security and cyber security awareness training. In regards to the foundation, so what is it? Well, it's ensuring that your foundational IT operations are in place before you can put in security solutions, and making sure that there's, you have put in a good security practice, and you include things like asset inventory, baseline security configurations, patch management, other things like incidents, requests management, change management. All of these things basically lead up to you being able to not only implement security, but also being able to have security operations intertwine with your IT operations. Adding security solutions to a weak foundation you're just checking a box. Security solutions can't manage assets that are unknown to an environment, leaving you vulnerable in your blind spots. So really making sure that you have, like, for example, making sure you have an inventory of all the software, all the devices, all the cloud applications that you're using in your environment, so you know what to secure. If you're putting in MFA or whatever solution and you're not covering everything, then you have some big gaps. How does it work? So confirming those processes and tools that are in place to implement, monitor, and make changes to your infrastructure. So if you think about not only building your house on a solid foundation with quality materials, but maintaining your house to prevent, costly repairs, increases to your insurance premiums later down the road. And, if say you wanted to replace your roof, you're not just going to have a roofer come in and just throw up a new roof. There's some planning involved. There's things that have to take place. You have to get a building permit to make those type of changes. So just kind of thinking about, those type of things the same way you would, think about your infrastructure of your business. So the first item, security solution I'll talk about is multi-factor authentication. I think a lot of people know what MFA is at this point, but a lot of people still kind of don't really understand what it is. And so, really should be a household term at this point, even for personal use as well, because the same kind of same things stand for personal as business. Your personal accounts can be compromised very much the same. So what is it? It's proving to a website or application, for example, and not limited to, but that you are the user of an account. It's important because it helps block unauthorized users from accessing private information that's stored on the internet or your infrastructure. And how does it work? Well, it's requires you to provide a second form of authentication on top of your username and password. So think about, being, for example, something like a password, something you have like a token or your phone, something in many cases what's emerging, something that you are, so biometric, so fingerprints or retina scan or facial recognition, and those are having a combination of at least two of those is what is considered multi-factor authentication. So it's similar to having keys to your house, but then also requiring a passcode on top as a second lock to unlock. So, it's something you have and something and kind of going back to the analogy with the house and the foundations, think about every entry point as like a window or your doors, every door you have. Think about every entry point as an application, a cloud service, things that you're using within your business. And you really have to have an inventory of all those to really know where to put MFA. So if you put MFA on, Office 365, but you're not putting MFA on your HR, your payroll applications, accounting, then you're missing a big piece of your whole, security strategy. And you want to make sure that MFA isn't just a checkbox on an insurance form, or isn't just a checkbox, here, but it's really a strategy, and having full awareness of what's in your environment, where your critical information is, and how to protect it, how to best protect it. So managed detection and response, often called MDR, is typically referred to when talking about endpoints, but it's not necessarily limited to endpoints. And what I mean by endpoints is, servers, workstations, so laptops, desktops, and even mobile devices, such as phones or tablets. But managed detection response is evolving, and it can also mean being able to monitor your network or cloud applications and being able to respond immediately. But mostly you're talking about the endpoint aspect of it. So why is it important? Well, it notifies your IT team or your security operations center when something malicious is happening within your environment. So think about what used to be traditional antivirus. It was looking for malicious files and would block those things. MDR is usually, when paired on the endpoint, is paired with what's called like a next-gen antivirus. So it's looking for things like anomalies, behavior anomalies. So if a application on your computer all of a sudden is doing some really weird things with system files, it has the capability to block those, identify those, and it can alert, automatically block. And in some cases, it may just notify, and it may not block if it's not quite sure if it's malicious or not. But that's basically, allows your IT team, your security team to not only adequately respond in that moment, but also, have logs and have the activity that took place before and leading up to that can help in a, forensics investigation as well. So think about another house analogy, securing your house with a state-of-the-art alarm system that's monitored 24/7, can detect intruders, anomalous behavior, and either stop and respond immediately to identify if there is an actual threat, and if so, address it. So think about the alarm to your house going off. It's being monitored by a security company, and they're waiting to see if it's going to be canceled by you, but they're basically getting ready to dispatch the police. They're potentially escalating the alarm. They might be, they're following a process, and they're going to help mitigate or eliminate that threat. And that's exactly what MDR is, and how it compares to like your environment. So like a workstation, get an alert, somebody's immediately looking at it, and they're either containing it or investigating it. Also, feel free, if there's any questions, pop them into the chat. And I think we have a Q&A session at the end, but happy to answer any questions between slides.
Thanks, Raum. So now that we've talked a little bit of a second layer approach of MFA, we talked about how to have your endpoints monitored. I want to talk a little bit around email security and why it's important. everybody in any type of business uses email. It's used in the form of conduct business, to send communication back and forth, with email is just kind of a source of communication outside of using Teams. But why is it important to secure it? Email is probably the most common form of technology that is compromised that threat actors will use to get a foot in the door. They will take every approach to either impersonate somebody to gain your trust, ask you to take an action, but it's important that we can protect your communication, not only internally, but externally. And with email security, what it does, it kind of sits in front of your email gateway, and it will look at, scan the contents of the message to see if there is a file contained within that email that could be malicious. And then that email protection will stop it before it ever gets sent to your end users. It will also look at links within your emails. If they are clicking, it says, for example, a great example is, hey, password's been compromised. We think it, please click this link and change your password. All of those links will, be spoofed or like impersonated to look like it's going to somewhere else that's safe, but in reality, it is a bad website. And that email protection will scan all of those links, make sure they're legitimate, and kind of really look at the contents of the email to make sure that they are safe. A good example of why email security is important and kind of how to tie it outside of the IT context is, think of when you're traveling, going up, you want to travel somewhere, you have to go to the airport, you go through TSA, and TSA is really that validation point where they're looking at your ID, your boarding pass, making sure that you are this person, you are on this flight, really kind of validating who you are. And then kind of that next step is taking your travel luggage, your backpack, and then putting it through. It'll look for anything malicious that you might have stored in that backpack that you're trying to sneak through. That's why we do the scanning. There could be a gun in there. It's really that security authority that's making sure that everything in the contents of that bag is safe to then go on and get on an airplane. So that's really the same thing that email security does, but it's in the form of protection of email. Next one we talk about, this is really foundational for any organization, is to educate their users on how to properly protect themselves and if they do ever experience any type of cyber threat. Your people are your biggest asset to your organization, but can also be your biggest liability. So it's very critical that you invest in them and provide them the skills that they need to properly spot, identify, and then how to report any type of cyber threats. It can be simple as monthly training, video games, anything that really gives them, a tool set of how to do something and be informed, not only to protect themselves while at work, but it's also great that the skills that you're teaching them at work can be applicable to their personal lives. Almost everybody has a personal email, a username, password for bank accounts, 401k, and all of the threats that we talk about at an organizational level are still applicable in a personal situation. So it's really just that educational part of understanding how to spot things, the things to look for, and then also just kind of building that culture around, if you see something, say something. A lot of times, most organizations don't have a massive security team. They may have one or two people, but they are responsible for protecting, say, 4,000 plus employees. So really turning your users as an asset and an extension to the security team by providing them that skill set, and then kind of having them be human firewalls. So kind of being the front end protection, and building a culture around talking about, cybersecurity, why it's important. Kind of in my past world working in the manufacturing, one thing that we talked about was always safety out on the plant floor, slips, trips, and falls. making sure you have proper safety protection on when you go into a restricted area on the manufacturing floor. So it also, kind of translated to cyber safety. How can we, provide protection or PPE protection in that cyberspace? So it's through training and awareness is how you build that skill set, build, informational awareness around the topic.
Yeah, with cybersecurity, awareness training, I think it's maybe one of the most important ones here. The things that we've talked about in regards to, MFA, managed detection response, email security, those help protect the users. The reality is people are like the biggest weakness in your organization as it relates to cybersecurity. But everything that we talked about, MFA, MDR, email security, like those can still, those aren't going to stop everything. And those can be compromised too. So if, your users are unaware that, that they shouldn't, that they're, let's say they're getting spammed on their MFA on their phone, right? It's not them, but they might just get tired of seeing it. They don't know what's going on. They might even be getting it, the bad actor may be targeting you at 9 a.m. in the morning, targeting users at 9 a.m. in the morning when everyone's logging in. And so they might not think much of it. So, educating users on the latest, ways that people are getting bypassing MFA. In regards to email security, I mean, yes, it's going to stop phishing. Yes, it's going to stop spam. It's going to help with anomalies. But if a business that you work with is compromised and their mailbox is compromised, and they're basically looking at all the emails and they're looking at the behaviors that the interactions that the two companies have had, and they're taking that information and they're going to send an email and craft it to look very much like a normal email. So educating your users on what to look for when an outside business has been compromised, right? Hey, all of a sudden they're asking me to, wire some money, even if it's like a week earlier. It might be something you usually do, like something that's odd, something, you have to educate your users to identify those things and to be aware. And so and have whether it's the finance team or accounting or payroll, add extra checks, manual checks, pick up the phone and call and verify things like that. You just kind of have to be always aware of. And it's always evolving. It's always changing. There's something new. There's new threats that are taking advantage of things that are happening in the real world, whether, it's COVID, Ukraine, Russia, whatever. And always keeping your employees and staff aware. It's not a one and done. It's an ongoing program. And it's, to be honest, the biggest bang for your buck. I think it's one of the best investments you can make is, the people are the front line of your organization. And this is where the compromises are happening. So I can't stress enough about how important this is, even if it's not a cool bell and whistle.
Thanks, Raum. I appreciate that. So as we recap, we talk about all of our foundational services, where to start your journey. But one thing that we do want to tell you is just start it. It doesn't matter where you are, but the longer you put it off or aren't clear, it's, the more risk that you're inheriting. So just, looking at the pyramid and our foundational structure, break it up in small chunks. This obviously isn't an end all be all, but we try to align our recommendations with, industry standard best practices that we get from NIST or CIS, those governing agencies that can apply to any industry. So if you do have any questions or thoughts around how do I even begin my journey, please reach out to Entara. We're here, we have experts on our team, and we're happy to have those conversations with you of just how to even start it. But this is just the first webinar in our series. We do plan to continue these on throughout the year. As we go through these webinars, we'll be talking about additional things that you can add into your journey to over time really mature your organization from a security aspect and security operations.
Yeah. And, if you're not doing any of the things that we mentioned here today, absolutely get on top of that. And again, kind of just going back to the foundational things, the things that you think you're doing, make sure that those are in check, especially like the asset management piece is critical to have awareness of all the devices and in your environment, have awareness of all the applications. Really, so you're not leaving gaps when you go to implement these things. Even like MDR. If you have kind of like windows in your house that you don't have protected with your alarm system, those are weak points. And that's where, the 1% of assets that aren't being managed or have no visibility, that don't have MDR, like those are the type of things that get you in trouble. So it's really, making sure you're doing the foundational things really well, and really making sure that you're tackling these 4 things we talked about today as soon as possible. And if you do have them, going back to make sure that you're covering your full, list of assets.
Thanks, Ron. So I do think we had one question come in. Question was, what provider does Entara recommend using for MDR solution? Great question. So we do have, landscape, tons of different tools, brands. Personally, we use CrowdStrike. That's kind of our go-to tool. But we are constantly evaluating our tools. Each one does something a little bit different, and has a little bit of different pros and cons to each. One thing that Entara does is always aligning and kind of doing our own external research. We like to use Gartner, a non-biased organizations that also do their own research and what's the latest and greatest. So while we use CrowdStrike, it's not to say that other tools out there or providers don't do a great job as well. I've used Defender for endpoint, and then the Microsoft stack in my other previous companies. We've seen Sentinel as another cutting edge tool. It's really just understanding what your needs are and how that tool can help meet those needs.
And you want to make sure you kind of have when you're looking at the tool or the CrowdStrike, Defender, Sentinel One, like you want to make sure you kind of have it paired with a IT or security operations center that can respond to those. Entara works with Entire to kind of bring that full 24/7 quick response. We also work with other, I guess, MDRs or SOC, but you will want to not only evaluate the tool, but also how you will respond, whether it's 9 a.m. or 3 a.m. in the morning, so that whatever's not happening in an automated fashion is actually being investigated by a real person, a qualified real person.
We have a couple of other questions that came through. So one of them here is, how do I approach getting buy-in from my leadership team who doesn't get why cybersecurity is important?
Good question. I mean, so the right answer is you wish like every company should be concerned with IT security, and they should be doing risk-based assessments and figuring out where to spend the money. The reality is some of those things aren't actually happening. So one thing is for example, some of the things we talked about today, if you don't have those things in place, you're going to get compromised. It's just a matter of when and how bad it will be. And the reality is even with these things, there's a likelihood that there's going to be compromise, and the hope is that you keep those things contained and really don't let it spread across your entire environment. But you need to kind of underline how any compromise could affect your finances, so financial loss, damage to the company's reputation, and loss of data, right? And so with any of those things, I mean, that could put you out of business if you're down for 10 days, or if there is information that's proprietary that's lost. It really could put you out of business. And I don't really try to use scare tactics, but like that's the reality, is like that those things absolutely could happen. And so you just kind of have to make a case for just investing in cybersecurity, but more so starting somewhere, right? So you can provide better information, and you can help provide where your actual risk lie, by having a program and a roadmap that does tie back to risk. With that being said, the thing that talks the most is insurance. So with insurance premiums rising based off the things that you do or don't have, if it's rising in your environment, typically if there's opportunity to save money by having MFA or cybersecurity awareness training, that is a really quick way in the door to make that case. And that's, for me as a CISO, like that's push come to shove. Like I really would like I said, love to have clients and companies doing risk assessments and making very strategic decisions, but you have to start somewhere. You have to start basic. And I guess a couple of ways that you could potentially also get the foot in the door is by doing a simulated phishing attack. So we partner with KnowBe4, and there's a couple others out there that you can actually run a campaign on your domain. And if you have half your organization's clicking a phishing email, then that's a problem, and it's very easy to display. Make sure you're authorized to kind of do something like that, but that would be kind of a good way to really exhibit where some weaknesses are, or maybe even like dark web lists, where like if you can search and see where passwords have been exposed, which is I'm not a huge fan of, because it's kind of somewhat of a scare tactic, but it might be what you need. But the reality is LinkedIn and all these third parties, like they've had compromises with your business email. And one of the things that you kind of always have to be concerned with is your users reusing the same password for multiple websites. If they're using the same password for your business anywhere else, like that's a huge red flag. And the reality is you really can't tell for sure if that's happening. But without MFA, and if you have no MFA and that password's been exposed, that is going to be problematic for you, because now they're going to try to log into your organization using the exposed LinkedIn password, and you're in trouble. So those are just few ways that I would kind of recommend making the case.
Awesome. Thanks, Raum. So we have another question that came through here asking about if Entara is hiring and what sort of talent we're looking for.
Yes, we are always looking to build, and grow our team. Entara as a whole is growing, so we're always looking for top talent in all forms. Anyone has a background in security or IT operations, or even in our incident response practice, we would love to, get you in touch with our talent team. And always please view our careers page on our LinkedIn or on our website. Always looking to add top talent.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan. We have another question here. It says, my team's fully remote. My company's fully remote. Do we still need all the solutions discussed? Where do I even start?
The answer is yes. Well, traditionally, most people are in the office, but I think, in the last few years, just that flexibility of being remote does introduce additional risks. So having a security strategy in place that can provide, extend protections to your home, or if you're working from a conference center or a coffee shop, we definitely want to make sure that wherever that place you call, your working space is protected, not only, from the networking, but the device level, the user level, really honing in on that training awareness that if they are working at a coffee shop, they're safe about what Wi-Fi networks they're connecting to. They're not just, wide open, they're using VPN. So really more around education, device protection. But yeah, sometimes I would say it's probably even more important if they're working remote or outside of an office to have these protections in place.
Yeah, and especially the things we talked about today. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're remote or completely in office, and most things we'll talk about in the series. It does not matter. The reality is most businesses are hybrid in some way or another, whether that's just allowing mobile phones or having laptops that go off site. So it kind of comes to that big picture, understanding your full environment, so you can make more and doing risk assessments and make sure that you're making the right investments, because there are, especially if you're fully remote, there are other things to consider. There's things to consider based off of the type of information applications users are logging into, what's stored on their computers, what's stored in the cloud. So again, this when we talk about these things, these are going to be relevant to most, but there's a lot more that is more detailed, and that's where that full strategic roadmap comes in.
Cool. Last question I have is, how do you determine what order people need to implement these different security solutions in?
Well, we probably the ones we just talked about today, you probably should implement those right away. And you really need to again, a strategic roadmap and doing those assessments. The insurance carriers have, I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago, they weren't even asking about MFA, and they were getting burned over and over and over. Now they're requiring it. So the things that they're asking for are usually the most common attack vectors. So if you're kind of following that lead, that's a great place to start. If you're following that lead, that's also means you're behind the ball. The emerging threats, things that are more relevant to your specific environment, that the best approach is just a holistic risk-based assessment. You're following a framework, you're identifying these things proactively, and you're understanding the risk and involved with not having those protections. You're identifying the costs, and you're getting it into the budget, your business budget, and that's the right answer. But understanding also that everyone doesn't have those capabilities. So that's kind of what this entire series is about, is to help you identify kind of the bare minimums, the less mature, and then we'll kind of, as throughout the year, these conversations will become more and more in-depth and mature. And everyone's not going to be able to do these things overnight, right? But there are things that should be done ASAP that we talked about today, but there's things that you need to start budgeting for in 2024 and beyond, right? Especially as your organization grows. A lot of these things are relevant to a company of 500,000, but as you grow and become more mature, there are additional things to be aware of. And also the reality is there's a lot of business to business that, you're working with third-party vendors or third-party vendors. Your clients are working with you as a third party. There is a uptick in everyone kind of doing more vendor management, doing assessments of the companies they work with, which is great. So they're also pushing businesses to do certain things. If we're going to do business with you, you need, vulnerability management, you need MFA, all these things. So what I would say is try to be proactive and not be reactive to those things. Because when you're reactive and you have a big deal in front of you and you don't have some of the more basic items or even, you know, maturing security items, you're in a position where you're having to spend that money, and it's not a fun position to be in. And you want your business to be, you know, safe. And so, yeah, hopefully that answers it without too much ranting.
So before we wrap it up, just want to say we really appreciate everybody's time joining us today in this webinar. Please look forward for more to come over the next few months. But after you log off, and if you know any questions do come up, please feel free to email our sales team, sales@entaracorp.com. You know, we really appreciate any feedback, questions, or if you're interested in any services that we offer, please reach out to our team. We're happy to assist.